Welcome to this episode of the Early Years Roundtable hosted by Realise. Today we're going to be talking about breaking the mould, coming out of the box of the phrase of it's always been like that thinking. And I'm joined by a host of panellists. So let's start. Please introduce yourself.
I'm John Warren. I work for John Warren Consultancy, and I also have my own company with two other people. We are Kingsway Nursery Management and Kingsway Nurseries.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm Karen. I work for Partou as a regional business manager, but I've actually been in the early years sector in one way or another for 45 years now.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm Shanti Flynn. I'm Quality and Education Director at Storal.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I think with the knowledge and experience that we've got around this table, we're going to have some great conversations. So I'm going to kick off and I'm going to go to John first.
Oh, cheers.
How can we manage outdated practices? Because we're still seeing them in the early years, aren't we?
Oh, there are so many outdated practices, and you think you've solved one problem, and you visit another nursery, and it's still there, even with this changing generations.
Yeah.
It seems to be passed on. There's lots of research out there, and you can just even without the research, you can go, I went to this nursery and this worked, and you should try it. But it still doesn't seem to stick. It's that those old practices seem to stick rather than the quality ones we want. So it's really a case of rolling up your sleeves and getting stuck in and showing them how it's done and showing that this does work, rather than you can't do it from an ivory tower. You've got to really get stuck in.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen, what do you think about that?
I agree. We do need to get stuck in, but also something we were discussing earlier around if you have a small child, you go for a meal, family meal, what's the first thing they put on the table? I put a template and some crayons for your child to do that. Mm-hmm. They go to school, they end up bringing back templates. And we in early years are sat there then going, no, that's not the way to do it. Uh-huh. So it's almost a mixed messaging. Yeah. And then there's also the side, I think, if you think about parents and their expectations. So we want them ready for school. Ready for school for us is they can do their shoes up, they can take themselves to the bathroom.
Yes.
For parents, it's all about can they write, can they read? Mm-hmm. And I think it's that expectation of us almost teaching the parents of what is right for early years and how to scaffold really early on, so that they're writing once they get to school. But while you're in the early years sector, we need them to be children.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, we've seen so many things change generationally. How are you finding things, Shanti, at Storal?
We still bang on all the time about process over product.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get that balance right, to explain that we can still send things home for parents around celebrations, Mother's Day recently, but it doesn't have to be about the product, the process, giving children choice. But something you've just said about the generations, one thing we've talked about a lot at Storal is about provisions, because it's not just outdated practices, it's outdated provisions. Are our home corners reflective of, what children see at home? Or, are we still very traditional in those practices?
I think we are. It's something, and the amount of times I've seen when they do, they want, you're booking a holiday, and they said, we're going to book a travel agent. I haven't seen a travel agent for years. We do all that booking online. Yeah. So there's those things that...
Or a post office.
Post office,
yeah.
The only one that's open in the area.
But you mentioned the role play as well.
Yeah.
I bet every role play we go into has a phone, as in an old-fashioned phone. How many children actually know what that is? Yeah. And yet we still put it in there, and we still see the home corner as that.
So, Shanti, you mentioned at Storal that you make sure your home corners are really reflective. So this must come back to the leadership. How are you supporting your leaders to move forward and break that mould and get some new thinking?
I think that the main difference is trying to change that mindset from managing to being a leader.
Yeah.
Because, we still call them managers, don't we? And they're early years managers and then nursery managers. But actually, it's about equipping them with those leadership skills. It's role modelling. It's being inspirational. And we've all known good leaders that we've worked for, and they stick in your mind. So, it's breaking that mould. And we've invested quite a lot in sort of leadership rather than management.
Amazing. And how are you finding that, Karen?
I think, like you say, there's the leaders as well. We're finding a lot of our leaders are much younger, and we've all mentioned here the generational thing. And I think that's quite impactful, because whereas those leaders who are in their 40s of that generation are quite solid, quite single-minded,
Yeah.
and now we're getting leaders coming into the sector that are much younger, different generation. They've had everything sort of from, we've gone from putting children up chimneys decades ago to now making sure they're acting accountable, and we see the value of, you know, children in our society. So our leaders now are very much open for the why not. You know, and just being able to tap into those leaders that really do go, I think we can try it, let's do it differently this way.
Yeah.
And helping them to work with those that are really more stayed in the, we've always done it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think you really have to show them, spoon feed them a little. We can't just change everything and expect everybody to go, yes, that works lovely, but just give them that opportunity to say, see, there is a different way.
Yeah.
You know, and saying why not is okay.
Change is scary though, isn't it?
It is.
That's
really
the bit.
scary.
It's about helping them through that change.
Yeah, we've just done a lot of work on the change curve with our managers, and I've got a meeting this coming week where we're delivering it with all of the managers just for them to understand, so they can then take that to their teams and talk through the different stages of change. And just because you're okay now, in a few weeks' time you may have gone back a little and think, I'm a bit nervous about that now. So how can we support you to get to a point where you understand that change was for the best?
And I think change is a really big topic, like you say. I'm glad you kind of pointed onto it, because some people are really adaptive to change and others are really quite resistant. And that's where, in my experience, I found the line between traditional leadership and maybe more modern styles. What small changes can we start to think about or encourage as leaders to shift this focus?
Well, I suppose it's a bit like Karen said about going at small steps.
Yeah.
But even going back to the leaders, I think sometimes some nurseries are so desperate to recruit, we're pushing people through the whole system too quickly.
Yeah.
So people are getting their level 3s and their room leaders the next day. Whereas, you know, when I was working more on the front line, you know, it was a couple of years before you became a room leader and the deputy and so on. So I think we need to spend more time with them. I agree, small changes, because these big changes make everybody freeze. You know, with the new changes around Ofsted inspections, everybody suddenly thought, oh, we're rubbish, because there's been change, and it will either stop people working or make them leave. But I think even going back further, because we're so heavily regulated within the sector, people are afraid about making mistakes, and so when you have to make that culture where, you know, if you go in and you see something, you know, like a display board that's not how you would like it to be, there might be a few spelling mistakes or whatever, you need to start from a positive side, you know, and say, well, I really like this, I really like that, but that needs enhancing, or could we try this again? So they get some really good feedback, and they don't feel scared about making mistakes. I'm not talking about safeguarding mistakes, I'm talking about, you know, some in practice. So I remember doing bubble painting with children when I was working in nurseries for the first time. I was in the toddler room, and I thought it was all Halloween. I had black paint, and I didn't think anything about, can toddlers actually blow through straws? And we're looking at the sort of straw, will they suck? And they all sucked, and they all had black tongues. So they enjoyed the activity. Their poo might have been a different colour for the day, but they enjoyed themselves. And I think we sometimes lose that in early years, the world of joy. You know, we want that. They said about changing the home calls and stuff. Make it a bit more fun and make them feel that, you know, things can go a bit pear-shaped. And our word isn't always gospel.
Yeah.
You know, like the why not? You know, why not? Yeah, I like that, but why not do it this way? That's how we just continue to evolve.
And I think it's interesting you say that. I recall I do a lot of work around leadership and joy, and that's separate to the work I do here at Realise. But it's about making people feel safe, psychological safety, isn't it? Especially as a leader, you want people to feel comfy to perhaps make a little mistake, you know, sucking the paint rather than blowing it. I remember making Play-Doh, and it turned out to be like slime, and it was a nightmare. But the children had a great time exploring. So why not?
Process of a product.
Exactly. Very much so. And I think, you know, we need to get the message, or reaffirm the message, that that's okay. We're still able to learn on that journey, aren't we? We're still able to have those explorations.
And it is empowering your staff team through those small things, for them to say it as well, for that team to go, I'm going to try that, and if it doesn't work, I know nobody's going to come and tell me I was wrong.
Yeah.
We're just going to go, okay, what can I do different next? Because that's how children learn.
And isn't that reflective practice? That's drilled into us from the moment we start our qualifications, isn't it?
And Karen's talked about the why not.
Yeah.
So we actually use why slightly differently. So if we do want to make a change, whatever it is, you know, policy or practice, we always say you have to give the why. because you have to get the buy-in, you have to help your team understand why you're making those changes.
Yeah, my biggest bugbear is when people say it's because of policy. And I think that's weak leadership. As leaders, we've got to know why we're doing it, and why we should do it. There's some things as well. We do the so what. When you're doing something, so what's the point in doing that? So what? But the whys. We definitely need to be able to answer the whys and not be afraid to be challenged ourselves.
Exactly that, like
Often.
you said. Because we don't have all the answers. As leaders in our fields, and we've got quite a lot of experience between us. We still don't know it all, and we're still learning.
And it's having that different perspective as well. So we've had leaders join us from different industries, which is quite unusual. In very traditional, outdated early years. I mean, we've all done this for years, haven't we?
We have.
So people from different industries also bring a different perspective. Which is quite refreshing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of changes have we seen over the years? Like, we are moving in the right direction, aren't we?
We are. I can remember years ago as a nursery manager taking over this nursery, and we're talking in the 80s, and it was it had one room and then these almost like little box rooms off of it, and they all had gates. And so the children would have to ask to go through the gate to go into the art area, or ask to go into the quiet area. And I went in one weekend and took it all down, made it all open plan so the children could free flow and go where they wanted. My team turned up on the Monday morning and were horrified, absolutely horrified, that I'd done this. And I said, but just give me a couple of weeks, and if you don't see the behaviour improve, we'll get there. Within a month, everyone was going, don't know when we ever had those gates up, because it just... A huge change for them probably was quite shocking, and possibly not the way I'd advise you to do it, but it's just understanding my why was you're struggling with children being able to self-regulate, but we're also making them wait to go and do that next activity. I'm 3 years old, I can't wait for 10 minutes for you to open that gate.
And they don't need to wait, do they? Their days about exploration.
Transitions are always tricky, aren't they? That kind of transition into outdoors, transition into meal times, transitions into sleep times, breaking those big groups. Death by circle time.
Oh goodness!
I had it on my list today.
Yes.
I think it is those transitions, and you said we have seen changes, and the free flows, and the free flow in and out. I just think you think you've got it, and so the children, you'll go to a nursery and they're free flowing all morning, and they go, dinner time, line up. I'm thinking, why are you lining up? You've been walking in and out all morning, self-regulating. You've been doing it yourself, and now it's like, come and line up, and then it's. A lot of the things that probably we've all got on our list, what we'd like to talk about is, it feels about compliance. If we can get these children to comply, if we can get them to sit for breakfast, sit for circle time, and then sit for snack, and then story time. When I've audited some nurseries, I've sat there, and you say, your children sit for an awful long time in the nursery, don't they? And they go, no, they didn't. I said, I've just put my stopwatch on 58 minutes. This child has sat because it's gone breakfast, circle time. Then what's the weather like? And it's and it's just, it's not that sometimes you see those things done really well, and it's like we're talking about breaking the mould. There's some things you'd want to stay because they do them really well. I mean, if you saw a group snack time and the children would all wanted to get over there together, and the person leading it was done very well. But like I was saying to these guys before we started, I'd asked for a rolling snack the other day, and they use visual aids within there, but they've got bananas and apples and oranges on the table, and they're searching for their card while the children are waiting to ask whether they want a banana. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting there laughing behind my clipboard thinking, could you have picked up the banana and asked them if they wanted this instead? So you think they're getting there, and then sometimes
intentions.
Of course it is.
Let me find my visual cue.
Because they've been told as well, isn't it? Like we would say, they've been told this is what they need to do, and probably, like you said, they haven't created that safe environment where they think, actually I can move outside the box. So it's a real good balance as well, because you want them to do that, but you also want them to be creative and add to it as well.
And I think, just touching on that, there's lots of things we expect of educators now in the setting, to use the visuals, to use the correct language, to do this, to do that. So there's a lot of pressure that sits with them. And I think coming back to the example you shared of removing all the gates, it takes courage, doesn't it, to say, I'm not going to use the card, I'm actually just going to pick up the fruit. Because I'm sure in that mind of that individual at the time was a bit of, I must use the card, and if I don't use the card, someone's going to tell me.
I've been challenging lunchtime and sleep time recently because, and I know it comes from, if you think back to 1997 when education went over, short 3 hours of preschool for children because, women didn't need a job, they just needed to be a homemaker. So that's where it came from, and we still run that morning and afternoon sessions and day sessions. We're trying to challenge it, but 8 till 1, child's going home at 1, they've got to have a sleep, so they have their lunch, we wash their faces, they lie them down in the bed. If you went out for dinner, you wouldn't go straight home and go to bed, would you? They need that time after lunch to relax and let their food go down. But in certain areas, I still see it sometimes, they're still like you were saying, it's the whole rhythm of the day. We've got to have lunch, we've got to have snack, we've got to get asleep.
I've seen some children come in for the afternoon session and come in and go to sleep and wake up for snack and then picked up.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's coming back to that traditional experience more than the modern one that we're kind of living in the day of fluidity. We almost let the routine run the day when actually the children should own the day. If sleep is a little bit late, that's okay, we'll all survive, it's not a problem, we'll make it.
I think the routines are, especially lunch and sleep, are done to fit the adult in the setting, to accommodate team lunches, so we do need to have a really good look at that. But some of those traditions are really important, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think something we're trying to do is, in this day of tech and this fast-paced world, trying to claw back a little bit of the traditions. And if you speak to anyone of our age, it's about the freedoms we had as children to play in the woods, to explore, and that bit seems to be missing. We made our own fun, didn't we?
We did,
And we're really trying to bring that back to a generation of educators that perhaps haven't experienced it themselves. So it's hard for them to try and instill it in our children. Absolutely. And we talk about resilience, don't we, all the time, and independence, and it's about maybe trying to go back to some of that natural childhood.
And I think that's where we get caught up in we've always done it that way, and sometimes that's a blessing. We've always done it that way, let's keep it, because there's real value to doing so. But then we need to make that line of maybe there's a better way, and how can we get there? So if we were to kind of begin wrapping up our conversation, how would we encourage anybody listening as leaders to start breaking that mould? And I'm not encouraging everybody to turn into rebels and go wild.
Be brave.
Be brave, exactly.
And question. There's nothing I love more than a professional debate.
And it's okay to debate, isn't it? It doesn't mean it's confrontational. It doesn't mean that it's going to end in bad tone. Let's explore.
If you've got a culture that's safe, and welcoming, and people feel able to speak up and to challenge senior leaders, then that's the best culture. That's how you move forward and innovate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. I think fundamentally what children need hasn't changed. I think we don't talk about that so much anymore. I rarely hear Maslow's hierarchy of needs mentioned with anyone, even in training. But that's the fundamental children need, and that's what we need as adults. We need to feel safe, we need to feel secure, we need to feel loved. And if we are creating that environment with our workforce as well as our children, then we're going to have those people that are going to try something different.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as well, we focus on the children when our most important asset, and the people we need to look after are our staff. Our staff always need to come first. And if you show them some things that make life easier for them, like a rolling snack means that you only need one person there. The rest of you can go off. Do everything. Sleep times, you can stagger your sleep time, so you're not putting all the beds out at once, you're not rushing. If you can show sometimes this is going to be easier for you rather than tougher for you, you're going to face less challenges through behaviour, etc. We have to give them some benefit, it's some of the carrots rather than the sticks. So, and I think there's some things that we do, try this, like you said, when we're moving the gates, it's going to be a lot easier for you. So sometimes we need to do that as well.
And I think it's exactly that, when we make a change, we want it to be beneficial, we want it to ease the workload and enjoy the time with the children, because you won't get that time again. We all know this. The admin will always be there, the policy will always be there, but the children will grow and flourish elsewhere. And it's about making sure that we can instill those moments of confidence and the moments of belief to give it a try. It's okay. isn't it? You know, to explore. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I'd love to see you all again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.